Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and well, a while ago I made a short talking about Klingon battleships, or the relative lack of for a species that is supposedly obsessed with warfare. They seem to be lacking rather a critical component of making war, that being giant warships with massive guns, instead going for lighter, more maneuverable vessels, even compared to the relatively peaceful ships of Starfleet. So why is that? Why do the Klingons produce so few battleships? And when they do produce battleships, why are they so insane? Now, to go through this journey, I cannot do this alone. I must bring someone in who has ample experience in the world of sci-fi insanity, and indeed to do so is, well, none other than
the person that you have made the biggest mistake bringing on. Generic greetings to anyone who probably doesn't know me and all of Venom Geek's audience. I am Science Insanity, a fellow creator dedicated to all of sci-fi in all of its wonderful forms, here to tag along and, well, kind of flip the roles a little bit, because normally I'm the lore master on my channel, but this time I'm the comedic relief, and I'm the person saying all the dumb things to entertain you today, while Venom is playing up the fact that he is a 5D chess genius with all of the lore.
Well, that's highly debatable.
I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, good sir. Your channel's great. I love your content. Let's talk about some Klingon battleships today. Let's get freaky and nerdy with it.
All right. Okay, right, well, let's hit it then. Okay, so the first modern Klingon battleship, emphasis on the term modern. There are other things that I'll maybe talk about another time, but for basically the whole modern era of Klingon history, the first really discernible Klingon battleship is the Korvat-class battleship. Now, this was built in the early half of the 23rd century. Very much reminiscent of earlier ships where it's got these various bracings and spars. And I think the best way to describe it is really just guns. Lots and lots of guns.
Yeah, it looks really weird for a Star Trek ship. I'm not used to seeing actual turrets on them. It reminds me a little bit of the JJ verse with the fact that the Enterprise had the phaser turrets on it, but it looks very cool. It's like a blockier, fatter Katinga battlecruiser and small. Especially because, like, you look at the 3D model and it's got this tiny little hangar on the back. It's like a midget Klingon warship.
It's even got like a little step for the hangar as well. I don't know what that's about. It's an interesting detail, gives it an interesting silhouette. But yeah, it's a little step, just in case you can't actually park in the shuttle bay for some reason.
Oh, you know what? I know what it is. It's when they go into a planet's atmosphere, when they're executing the incompetent or cowardly or their prisoners, they just bring them out in the back and kick them off the back of the ship. That's how they do it.
Ye be walking the plank. Yeah, that definitely lines up, especially for this period of Klingons. So the original designer, Soren 77, he actually intended this as a pre-TNG era ship. However, a lot of the design hallmarks, with the exception of the glowing red Bassard collectors, rather menacing, but the overall design, the shape, the proportions, the fact that it has these support spars are very, very much reminiscent of ships from the 22nd century and indeed the early 23rd century. And uniquely among Klingon ships, perhaps, it wasn't designed to fight the Federation. Si, would you like to guess who it was meant to fight?
Ooh, there's a number of things I can pick here, depending on which settings lore we go off of. If I wanted to make everybody mad and exclusively go by Star Trek Discovery, I would probably say the Vulcans, maybe the Romulans. If I want to go by, like, uber deep lore that I might be wrong about, was it that alien race that enslaved the Klingons that Kahless famously killed on their homeworld? I assume that's way too far back. Yeah, the Herc.
That's a long time ago.
Okay, yeah, that's way too far back, yeah.
Wrong on both counts. This ship was designed first and foremost to fight Klingons.
Okay, you know what? That's not really fair. Like, that's every ship is first and foremost designed to fight Klingons. Their national pastime is killing each other. That's not fair.
So, critically, this is designed in a time period where the Klingon Empire isn't all that unified. It will gradually, during the 4 Years' War that we'll talk about in a minute, it will become more homogenized and united. But at the time when this was built in the early 23rd century, you've got a lot of individual Klingon houses who were just basically looking to flex on one another. And this ship is, if anything, a gigantic flex.
Is it really? It looks so small, though, judging by the windows and stuff.
Well, context for time period. I mean, none of the ships of this time are particularly big. You know, most of the ships are for really holdovers from the 22nd century. If you're very, very lucky, you'll be buying one of the newer things like the D-24 or the D6 or D-16s. But most people are just running off of ships like the D5, the Raptor, or that very, very ugly bird of prey from Enterprise.
Yeah.
So compared to that,
I guess that's fair. It's not small. It's average.
it's just chunkier, really. That's the essential takeaway, is that it is chunkier. And again, it is designed first and foremost to fight other Klingons. Now, in order to do this, it is armed with a total of 2 torpedo launchers. Now, these are actually short-range torpedo launchers. There is a distinction here, which I'll just introduce you to. Ships like the D7 or Katinga, they have that big torpedo launcher in the middle, that big aperture in the middle of the bridge section.
Yeah, the big glowing Eye of Sauron mounted on the lower front bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Or on the lower front of the head section.
Now, that's more than just a simple torpedo launcher. That is a high-powered acceleration torpedo launcher. So critically, it's basically able to act as somewhat of a railgun, and that will accelerate torpedoes to extremely high speeds. That's what enables the Klingons to often outrange Starfleet, who tend to go with the simpler style of torpedo launcher, which only accelerates the torpedo a little bit and then basically says, all right, you're on your own now. Off you go to the target.
That would mean proportionally then Klingon torpedoes, the long-range torpedo launchers, would be a lot easier to hit targets with, but if they were maneuvering, it would be a lot easier to miss. Because if the torpedo's moving like a hell of a lot faster than a Federation counterpart, that would mean that any turning it's doing would also be much harder, or it would turn proportionally slower, right?
Well, it's got time to close a gap, and the torpedo still has the ability to maneuver. Whereas, and also, the key thing is the torpedo has to see what it's shooting at. A short-range torpedo, if it's traveling relatively slowly and the ship that it's shooting at, or that's been aimed at, is moving quite fast, it's more likely that the ship will have the chance to get out of the line of sight of the torpedo and for the torpedo to miss. If that torpedo is traveling much, much faster, it's going to be a lot harder to get out of the line of sight of the torpedo before it gets to you, is sort of the idea. So there's definitely trade-offs.
Okay.
And one of those is a generally lower rate of fire. But this ship, regardless, has only the short-range style torpedo launchers. It's a very brawly boy. In terms of its length, you already alluded to the fact that this is quite a small ship. It is only 203 meters long, which would make it actually smaller than the original D7. Of course, the D7 comes out technically after this, but all things considered, it is quite a compact little battleship. It's armed with 2 light disruptor cannons, just either side of the bridge, if you can see those.
Mm-hmm.
I guess those are just for personal defense or pretending to be contributing when you're on the bridge.
It's so that the captain can play with the joystick and shoot at things while pretending to control what his crew's doing.
You mean just like Riker in Insurrection?
Exactly. Or if you've got like an insubordinate second officer or something, you can let him play with those while you actually take care of what's going on in the battle.
Play with that. All right? Play with that.
You have an extremely important mission. You must use these guns to shoot at the enemy. You shall contribute greatly.
Yeah, it's just Space Invaders.
It's like giving your little brother an unplugged controller.
Yeah. It then also has a total of 10 medium disruptor cannons. Those are the ones that you commonly see across the ship. And then finally, a large, heavy disruptor cannon mounted on the belly. I assume probably for shooting at planets that looked at you the wrong way. So, as I say, this ship was used in the 4 Years' War, where it was then forced to not fight other Klingons and instead fight other annoying Starfleet ships, and there we started to see some problems emerged. First and foremost is that it had now while it had a very deadly main volley, basically able to cripple most Starfleet ships with just a single volley of its full battery, it suffered from a multitude of problems, up to and including the fact that it was very slow, and basically could never bring enough firepower to take care of all the ships that would be assailing it. And also, because it was very slow critically, a lot of other Klingons just had no patience for it. Klingons are not known for being particularly patient, and really when it comes down to it, it's very difficult to persuade a Klingon captain who has a very fast and maneuverable ship to stand still and wait for this big lumbering battleship to catch up. So they didn't. They would simply leave this battleship in the dust. Maybe it can mop up fortifications and other positions that the other ships can't be bothered to deal with. And the result of that was that often enough in engagements, the Corvat would actually find itself outnumbered, meaning that actually it never had the chance to bring the full force of its main volley against a single target, because it would always be assailed by multiple targets, meaning that it would have to split fire, and then suddenly it goes from being a battleship capable of vaporizing anything in its path to just another big lumbering cruiser that's spreading its fire across multiple targets and is really just sitting there crying in the shower.
So if that was the reaction that the Klingons had, why did they even bother pursuing these kinds of battleships to begin with? Like, from what I understand, the Klingons have a love of two things. They're giant, ridiculous, oversized, barely maneuverable battleships with enough firepower to, well, level a planet, and they're ridiculous, cloaky bird of preys that, flank around and fly as if they're in a fighter craft rather than a starship.
Well, it's first important to note that in this period, things like the bird of prey don't quite exist yet. There's various ships that kind of come close, but they really, really like the battle cruiser. During the 4 Years' War, the Klingons will have a ridiculous number of cruisers, more than they really need. And the problem is that it creates an enormous logistical chain, because you have all these different cruisers that are all basically doing the same thing, but they're all built differently by different companies and different houses, using different parts, and all with very different ideas about how they should be used. And that's ultimately what contributes to the Klingon defeat in the 4 Years' War, is that they just end up becoming so disorganized.
Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Things like organization, patience, and teamwork are dirty words in Klingon society.
Yes.
Practically a slur.
Exactly. This ship often suffered the fate of... Are you aware of the Santissima Trinidad?
Not at all.
The giant Spanish ship of the line from the Napoleonic Wars. It was a 4-deck ship of the line. Most ships of the line, or at least British ships of the line, had 3 gun decks. French ships of the line had 2 gun decks, but the Santissima Trinidad had 4 gun decks. It was gigantic. So at the Battle of Trafalgar, the Santissima Trinidad, while incredibly powerful with her 4 gun decks, could only basically sit there and take hits as multiple British ships would assail her from either side, pummel her, and then move on, getting out of the way of the Santissima Trinidad's admittedly terrifying volley. And this is much the same fate that the Corvats would meet, being assailed by multiple Starfleet vessels and being forced to split their firepower and unable to really bring its full wrath against a single target.
Isn't that what always kills these giant ships, though? Is if you just leave them alone to be swarmed by a bunch of smaller vessels or more maneuverable vessels? Like, you'd think the Klingons, with their illustrious history of war, would have been like, maybe we shouldn't let our giant flying gun bricks just mess around alone.
Yeah, but no one wants to fly with them because they're slow and boring, and slow is boring, and we want to go fast.
Klingons, they'd much rather have fun than win the fight.
Yes.
What a bunch.
If you're going slow, that just sounds like a skill issue. Indeed, actually, during the 4 Years' War, it was regarded by the Klingons that if a corvette was able to catch up to your fleet, you were going too slowly. So they were basically playing a game of keep away from the corvette the entire war.
Oh my god. Are you seriously? If the biggest, most powerful weapon you have is in the fight, you're doing the fight wrong? What? That's so dumb.
That's
Oh,
the Klingons.
Klingons. I love the Klingons. They may have incredibly bumpy and rough foreheads, but man, are their brains smooth.
Because more glory to me and my house.
Fly me closer. I want to hit them with my batleth.
So the 4 Years' War doesn't go particularly well for the corvette, and the Klingons take the lessons of the 4 Years' War and they come out with a number of different designs. This is really where the tree of Klingon battleship design starts to expand. One of the directions is what ends up with the B9. No, not the D9. I know STO calls it the D9, but the D9, as far as I'm concerned, is a cruiser from FASA, and B9, B denoting battleship, goes a lot better, puts it in a certain context as well with other designs that we'll be looking at. So this can perhaps best be described as a... Visually, it is, of course, a proto-Negh'var. That is how STO designs it. But really, it is best described as a attempt at a heavy battle cruiser. So rather than going out of their way to design a battleship, so to speak, they instead approach the design from the perspective of, let's just make a bigger, meaner version of our pre-existing cruisers.
Why is it so smooth? Like, I know you just dumped a ton of great lore on me, but I can't get over why this version of it looks so smooth. Don't Klingon ships, aren't they normally giant bricks? Like, they're all blocky and squared off.
Well, critically, Sai, this is not any period of Klingon history. This is the 2250s and 60s. Well, 2260s. This is the 2260s where Klingon ships are silver. Or grey, depending on your preference. I would say silver.
No, the classic green. They're not camoed anymore. How will they hide from the enemy in space?
This is a real soft spot of mine personally, because effectively it's very imitative of Soviet aircraft of the early Cold War. Your MiG-21s, which are all painted in sort of metallic, bright metallic colours. They're all very shiny and silver, and that's very much something that comes through with all the designs of the TOS style era. Anything that is sort of TOS is very much got those kind of early Cold War aesthetics.
Like, I agree with you on that. It is very reminiscent of Soviet aircraft, but I can't get behind it the way you can. I'm so used to the normal Klingon aesthetic, and I'm so used to the normal color scheme of that dull green with like brown accents that just it doesn't look right. It looks like someone from a different faction tried to imitate a Klingon ship. It looks it looks weird.
Don't worry. We won't stick with it for too long. But effectively, this ship, as I say, is a giant, basically an upscale battle cruiser. It's a disruptor-focused vessel, so doesn't really bother with torpedoes at all. That's something that's very common across the entire period of the 2250s and 60s, is they basically kind of ignore torpedoes for a little bit, just rely on having disruptor cannons. And this thing has a good number of disruptor cannons.
So is this when the Klingon designs start moving more towards what the Federation has, which is like disruptor strips, or is that just not modeled? Like, are the turrets not modeled on it? Because on the front of the ship, it looks like they've got two big emitter strips on there for the disruptors to fire from.
So there's a mix here. So you have, on the underside of the ship, there are apertures for large disruptor bolts. But yeah, at this point, there's a lot more disruptor, not necessarily arrays. Arrays are something very much part of the 24th century. At this point, you're looking at batteries, which is the same as what Starfleet ships have. It's the 2260s. Most factions, you can't actually visibly see the weapons. It really is just guesswork.
Okay.
Same with the original Enterprise. You can't actually see any of the weapon emplacements there. You do just kind of have to take an educated guess.
Well, is that fully accurate though? Because I remember in the original series, the original Enterprise, it has those bit like what's the word I'm looking for? Almost bay underneath the saucer section that you see a lot in the CG scenes where the blue lasers come out of. I always thought that, yeah, that's where the actual phasers are on that ship.
According to the TOS remaster, that's where everything is, which is sort of where you run into the issues. That's where your phasers are, that's where your torpedoes are, despite the fact that that does mean that the ship that you're shooting at has to either be level with you or below you. So I've done a whole separate video on where the Enterprise's weapons probably actually are.
Well, I mean, it is space. Getting someone below you can be as simple as rotating to the left or right. And, you know, it's Star Trek. Everyone always engages on a flat level plane anyways, because fighting fair is what, you know, good enemies do.
So basically, this was built bespoke. It wasn't using modular parts, which was kind of the hallmark of this era, is that all the Klingon ships of this period were built using the same engines, the same bridge sections. They were all very uniform, and that was what was going to help them beat the Federation when they next went to war, was they were just going to outproduce them with modular ships. The trouble was with this design is that it wasn't. It was a completely bespoke design. Every part was custom made, which meant that it was very good, but it was also extraordinarily expensive.
I would imagine with that kind of bespoke design, it would also be a nightmare to repair or refit, because every single part is custom made. Like some engineer randomly filed down the nuts and bolts on this specific panel over here in order to make it fit properly. That would be a disaster. I would also imagine, since it's bespoke, it was only sold to the most discerning and wealthy of Klingon captains that had looted and plundered their way across the stars.
So in many ways, it's suffering from the same problems that got the Klingons during the 4 Years' War, where they were really struggling with, you know, everyone had bespoke cruisers, and they had managed to just get it to now, okay, well, there's a bespoke battleship for those who can afford it. But, yeah, it still wasn't that useful. And critically, when you design a ship that is essentially operating like a battle cruiser, but on a larger scale, it means that really what it's actually meant to do is be a battleship hunter. Now, there are battleships that Starfleet used, things like the Proxima class.
Oh my god, hello nacelles.
This is
What is that?
It is 4 nacelles and 2 engineering hulls.
Oh no.
Yes.
Are you telling me it's a catamaran design with the saucer on top?
Yes.
Oh no, it is.
Yes.
That's awful. That's genuinely terrible.
So, with Starfleet building, admittedly not many of these kind of ships, but nonetheless they were building them. The Klingons did feel obliged to build the B9 as a response, as a battleship hunter, something that was going to be able to track down and kill other battleships. And this kind of thread in Klingon starship design will continue to carry through into other designs. But there was also another thread that came from the Corvat, and that was looking at the problems that the Corvat suffered from and saying, okay, the Corvat was very slow and not very maneuverable and was shot at constantly. What if we just armoured the hell out of it? And that, my good friend...
Pardon my language. The brick shithouse design of battleships. Let's go. Show me the giant fat man block ship. Come on.
The L.
Oh, there it is.
Dangerous fat man. Not a safe fat man. He is a dangerous fat man.
Is there any such thing as a safe fat man? Oh my god, it's so chunky.
Tis very chunk.
Holy Jesus. Everything about this ship is just wide. That's how you define the whole ship. Sum it up in one word. Wide. Like, what?
So another point to drive home is you see the large belly sort of dangling down and wobbling beneath.
Yeah, the massive thing that looks like it's interrupting the the line of vision between the
Yes.
nacelles, yeah.
So that is actually detachable. That is a detachable module, which is something of a redeeming feature. And just speaks to, I don't know what they were planning of sort of attaching to this. Maybe a small space station, a planetary base. I mean, something big for sure.
What do the Klingons need for like recreation and fun? Like the Pain Stick Gallery? Is this like the Hall of Screaming Torments? Like whatever it is, it's the equivalent of the ice cream ship from like real life navies. That's what it is.
Yes, that's actually it's a blood wine ship.
Oh, that's perfect. It's the Bloodwine and Gach ship. You just go there you go there for shore leave.
So this thing is best described as a literal battering ram. So yeah, in the offense, it's going to be very, very slow, very, very plodding. It's going to slowly advance towards the enemy and then knock out whatever's in its way, and also tanking any incoming fire. Alternatively, defensively, you can basically use it as a mobile strong point, a defensive station. There is actually some value to this, because while this ship is very slow, most Klingon ships are, of course, very agile and maneuverable. So what this actually means is that you can tie down enemy formations with just this enormous brick. You can force the enemy to commit their ships to dealing with that, and that frees up your battle cruisers and light cruisers to exploit the gaps left in the enemy defenses. This ship is a little bit bigger. It's still not colossal. It's about 242 meters long, 151 meters wide. So it's actually only 10 meters longer than a D7. It's just
extraordinarily thick.
Thick. Yeah, there's no other way of saying it. It is just thick.
Like by pure dimensions, it's probably not that much bigger, but oh my god, by volume and mass, it's probably enormous.
Yes, probably, yeah, would outdo most ships of the period.
Important question, can it move? I don't see like any significantly big propulsion on that thing. Like at least the Federation ship you showed me, it's an abomination, but it looks like it's got a lot of power in those nacelles to move it around. Can this thing move? Is it like a semi-mobile space station?
So if you look at the very, very back of the side-on view, you can see the back of, at the sort of bottom right, you can see the engine nacelle, or the back of the engine nacelle. That is the same engine nacelle as is used on the D7, which is very much conforming to what the Klingons wanted, which was a nice modular fleet which shares components, but you're trying to move a ship of this size with the same pair of engines that you're using for your battle cruiser.
That is comedically dumb. That oh, Klingons never change. You take one step forward and cha-cha slide 3 steps back.
So it started out with 4 torpedo tubes and 10 disruptors, but in the 2270s it underwent a refit, much like the Katinga, I guess because they couldn't bear to get rid of them, and they didn't want to scrap them. That would be too much effort, but they also weren't going to put them at the forefront anymore, so they decided to just, I don't know, refit them and up armor them some more and up gun them some more. So now this thing has a total of 12 disruptor turrets, 8 torpedo tubes, and then 3 long-range torpedo launchers. So 1 in the front, 2 in the back, which suggests that perhaps it was a little bit worried about being poked in the butt.
There is enough mass on the back of that thing to hide an entire constellation class behind it. Like, I would be a little afraid of being shot up the butt as well. I can't imagine this thing would be able to maneuver to get out of it either. Like, your only choice is to put weapons firing on every single arc. Otherwise, the enemy is just going to sit in that empty arc and shoot you until you eventually, in a few hours, die.
Yes. So this is basically where, well, this is partially where the design of Klingon battleships went with the whole brick approach. However, going back over to the more battlecruiser style battleships, or, pursuit battleships, we see a new kind of idea develop from the failures of the B9. And that is, of course, the B10.
Oh boy, is this going to be another really big... Oh no, that's actually a really good looking one.
Well, you're looking at it from the top there. From the top, it's a beautiful ship. But if I was to show you perhaps
Oh no.
this view, you may have a somewhat different assessment.
Oh god, it's awful. Oh no, look how they massacred my boy. What is this? Did the Federation try to build a Klingon battlecruiser? What the hell is that?
This, as a design project, kind of got a little bit out of hand.
Really? You don't say.
This ship was never actually built. It ended up in development hell. But basically, the idea was to build what we would call a pursuit battleship. So this is a little bit like the Bismarck or the German pocket battleships, as something that's going to go out and do commerce raidings behind enemy lines and just erase anything that tries to get in its way. So it's not necessarily going to be head bashing into the front lines. This is meant to be going around the back and taking out the enemy supply lines.
I hate it. I hate everything about this. You know what part I especially don't like? I especially don't like the bulbous front part that they stacked a whole bunch of like saucer sections on. Why are they copying Imperial Japan? Why are they building a pagoda mast on the front of their ship? I don't get it.
It's tracking sensors. It's so that they can track down enemy merchant vessels when behind enemy lines. So this would be a very effective ship. That would also be why the deflector is so pronounced compared to other Klingon ships, which don't tend to even have a full deflector like that does.
It's so ridiculously over the top, though. Like, what merchant ships are they tracking? Some fisherman on his boat on Earth, and they're gonna go blow that up? Like, this looks like it's got enough sensors to peek across the galaxy and spy on someone while they're taking a bath. Like, what? It's so over the top.
Yes. And yeah, who knows what would happen to those sensors if that ship actually ever opened fire. They would probably all just get shaken off.
I imagine the first piece of damage that bled through the shield, or the first shot that got through unshielded, would immediately cut that entire section off. Like,
yeah,
that looks like such a structural weak point.
So they learned, but however, they did learn from the failures of the Fat Man and the B9, where the B9 had bespoke nacelles, and the Fat Man tried running a gigantic battleship on just two weedy little D7 nacelles. So what the B10 was going to do was have 4 D7 style nacelles.
You know what I like about it? And when I say like, I mean with an incredible amount of pain. I really like how the 4 nacelles look like the stumpy little legs of some incredibly inbred, destined to die animal. It looks like a dog that's in incredible pain. It looks like, from the side angle, it looks like it's suffering. Why was it born like this?
I can't tell you. Well, no, I can tell you. It's called Project Creep. It was called Wouldn't It Be Cool If... Insert additional feature.
Oh god, yeah, the saying that literally derails every design ever. Wouldn't it be cool if? Oh. And knowing the Klingons, wouldn't it be cool, ends with something absolutely asinine.
Yes, and then that includes, wouldn't it be cool if this ship could separate into 2?
Oh my god, get out of here. Don't.
Yes.
Don't you dare tell me that the front neck part comes off of the ship. Don't you dare.
Yes.
No.
Yay.
Oh my god. Are you... Who designed this? Who in real life? Did they know that they would design a ship that breaks apart into a flying
So
meme of a wing and there's no polite way to say this, a woman's self-pleasure device? 'Cause,
oh
like,
no.
that's what it is. When it breaks off the front, that's what it is. Am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong.
The original, so this version that we're looking at was rendered by Adam Turner, but the original design was way back in the 1970s for a game called Starfleet Battles. This was in a very interesting time where original series had happened, but the movies hadn't happened yet. So literally the only thing Starfleet Battles had to go off was whatever appeared in the original series. And yeah, multiple nacelles are a very, very common trait of Starfleet Battles and their designs.
Oh man. That's so weird. It's like they tried to combine a Klingon and Federation ship and got this just monstrosity.
But you will be glad to know that this ship was never produced. The Klingons never built it.
Oh, thank God.
However, it did succeed in scaring the absolute pants off of the Federation, because the Federation got wind that this was being built, this mega Klingon battleship that was going to raid their supply lines and infiltrate deep into Federation territory, pillaging and plundering as it went. And that's ultimately what led them to build the Excelsior with its fancy pants transwarp drive.
Are you telling me that the Klingons Russia'd themselves? They designed this incredibly advanced, ridiculous weapon, scared the entire world, then the entire world built a crazy counter to it, but they ran out of money and never built their crazy weapon to begin with?
You mean, well, it's a little bit of back and forth, because, yeah, basically the example I always thought of was the MiG-25 Foxbat and how that spawned the F-15 Eagle. But the only reason that the MiG-25 Foxbat, a Mach 3 interceptor that is literally just the two biggest engines, or jet engines the Soviet Union could produce with some wings bolted onto them, the only reason that was produced is because the Soviets thought the Americans were building like a Mach 5 nuclear bomber.
How? Oh, okay. All right. It's okay. It's the Cold War. It's the Cold War. Everyone's insane.
It's the 2270s. Everyone's insane. So, with that in mind, we'll now revisit the more bricky side of the Klingon battleship in the form of the Chimera. Now, this is less of a direct battleship and much more of a combination assault cruiser would perhaps be the best description. So compared to, I'm sure you'll say, compared to what we've just seen, this is a little bit more tame.
Okay, yeah, it's this is a palate cleanser. It's like you just had the worst thing ever and now you've got something that's just bad. So by comparison, it looks great. I love it.
Yeah, so it is basically a upscale of the D10. I don't know if you're aware of the D10. The best way of describing the D10 is that it is literally a D7 in a trench coat.
That is a pretty good way of putting it. That's a wonderfully descriptive definition. Oh, yep, I remember this thing. I remember this. I didn't know this is specifically what it was, but I do remember seeing this before. And yep, you are right. It does in fact look like it's wearing a trench coat. Oh man.
So the Chimera is an attempt basically to formalize this into something that's a bit more chunky, because while the D10 is relatively potent, it is ultimately built off of a cruiser chassis.
So when do the Klingon battle cruisers or battleships get into like the modern Klingon era where they don't look ridiculous? It seems like a lot of these early designs, they have no idea what they're doing. Like they're just kind of throwing out ideas left and right to see what sticks and going back and forth between different design elements when they figure one might work and then the other might work. And it's very strange. I didn't know that the development was this chaotic.
Well, it's a very slow and steady process. So this is something that they kind of settle on. They quite like this, and this will stick around into the 24th century. They break them out for the Dominion War, basically use them as troop transports. They're decent for the time, particularly as command ships, and it was consistently upgraded throughout the 24th century. So in the 24th century, you'd see the nacelles, particularly, those would change. You'd end up with some with Vocha nacelle, that they'd very much be kind of modernizing and updating the ships to keep them going.
So that's very interesting. So unlike the Federation, then the Klingons prefer to keep old designs, upgrade them, iterate them, rather than creating fully new ones. Because the way you're describing it, it's like
oh my goodness,
like they go through like phases where they're like they design a whole bunch of new ones. The ones that work, they just iterate on 100 times. The ones that don't, they forget, and then they just kind of keep going with that until they eventually run into a situation where they're like, okay, we really need new tech and new ship designs now, and then they start the whole process again.
Oh yeah. The Klingons will keep using a ship basically up until it just is absolutely terrible, and even then it will take an awful lot of persuasion, because of the way the Klingons' economy is orientated, where a lot of funding is locked up with the great houses rather than the central government, means that to actually put funding behind a new technology project is actually extremely difficult.
So how have the Klingons actually kept up then? Because like I know the Klingons love very heavily armed, very large ships, at least heavily armed and large in comparison to like what Starfleet puts out most of the time, but Starfleet is consistently way ahead of them in technology. It's like it's the primary reason, at least from what I understand, that the Federation keeps winning their wars with the Klingons.
Well, it's worth saying that in the 23rd century, the Klingons actually start from a technical advantage. And as the 23rd century wears on, that advantage diminishes. And that ties into the kind of ebb and flow with the power of the Chancellor. After the 4 Years' War, where everything was a disorganized shit show, the Klingons put an awful lot of stock into saying, no, we need to put our weight behind the Chancellor, we need to support the central government, we need to have a more organized approach to our military and to our conquests. That's what breeds this very uniform military in the 2260s and in the original series. But even by the point of the movies, and certainly by the time you get to Star Trek VI, which is in the 2290s, those kind of house loyalties and inter-house politics are starting to reassert themselves, and that only gets worse as the Empire starts to stagnate going into the 24th century as a result of praxis. But they do manage to get right one thing, and that being their pursuit battleship eventually. So this...
Oh, that is a classic Klingon ship. Well, not quite classic, but it's got all the form, it's got the shape, it's getting there.
So this is the L-39 Bloodslayer, and this was launched in the 2290s, and it was very much similar in terms of its intention to the B-10, only this thing actually was built and worked. And for the time, it would have been a very, very good pursuit battleship, would have given Excelsior a run for its money. It was still lighter and undergunned compared to the Excelsior, but it was intended always to be a fast, agile vessel that could harass a retreating enemy and again exploit gaps in enemy defenses, and it was ultimately a more realistic prospect for them to build. The B-10 was going to finish up at about 350 meters long, which is quite big, especially for the time when it was designed, which was the 2270s. This is only about 280 meters long, which is a lot more reasonable. That's bigger than a Katinga, but not by a whole lot. It's still very much in that category. It's a more reasonable design.
It's also far more skeletal, it looks like. There's less unnecessary stuff all around it. It looks like, I don't know, Star Trek has always confused me a little bit, because, you know, some of the ships look very beefy, very big, but armor mass doesn't really seem to be a thing in a lot of engagements. Like, it never plays that big of a role in a ship's survivability compared to the shields. This looks a lot more skeletal, looks a lot more like the Klingons were like, okay, It's going to be guns, necessary systems, engines, nacelles to be very fast, and then we're going to make it as skeletal as possible and rely on the shield to protect it so that we can cut down on production costs. That's what it looks like to me, at least.
Yeah, at their best, yes. That's arguably something that the Klingons will take forward. Now, I know you thought we were heading into more sane territory.
Oh, no.
But I think you need to now brace yourself. You see, a ship that was, again, designed in the 2290s, saw some limited production, was the final iteration, arguably, of this idea of building a tanky battleship. And this intended to do so not so much by use of mass alone, but with new and advanced armors, presenting the D-39 Shellback.
Oh, why do you hurt me like this? It's literally. I remember this ship. I remember this. You showed me this once before. It's the giant triangular turtle with the stupid head that extends. Oh, no.
Yes. So this is ultimately answer to the question of why, you have the classic dilemma between mobility and protection. And the D-39 says, well, why can't I have both? So it makes use of this more cruiser-like design. It's a very low-profile, sleek ship, very flat, especially compared to the Fat Man or even the Chimera. It's a very low and sleek ship with the levels of protection afforded to it by ablative armor.
Oh, that's something very unique for Star Trek. Normally, armor isn't even a factor unless they just use it to replace the shields. Our armor integrity is down to 40%. We can't take another hit like that. That's not really how armor works, my friend. It's not really how that works.
So there's a couple of different iterations of armor that you can really look at. In the early periods, like in Enterprise, armor is definitely a thing. Particularly, you have dispersive armor. That's one that's often talked about, which was where you would just disperse energy across a certain area of the hull. You have polarized hull plating, which is another kind of sort of armor. It comes and goes. There's a whole segment of starship armor that I can and will cover in a video elsewhere. But critically, this is the first use of ablative armor, admittedly very, very early ablative armor, which is why the ship is shaped the way it is. Do you know what ablative armor is?
Yep, that's pretty much how the armor in Battletech works anyways. As they take damage or absorb energy through kinetic impacts or just energy weapons hitting it or really anything, instead of trying to be strong enough to deflect, absorb, or nullify that attack, the armor instead disperses the energy by ablating off, so that the armor melts away or burns off or just cracks to pieces, and it disperses the energy of that attack harmlessly out into space. But you lose a little bit of armor while doing it.
Yeah, so effectively it's a kind of reactive armor. It's a little bit of ERA. Someone let the Ukrainians get hold of a Klingon ship.
They just stapled 1 billion ERA bricks onto it and said, good enough.
So this was actually designed as a joint project with the Gorn, of all people. Klingon-Gorn relations have been rocky from time to time. The Klingons will annex some of their territory, the Gorn will retaliate, but, that's just what all neighbors do, isn't it?
I don't think so, but I mean, sure, I guess, in the Klingon world. To the best of my knowledge, weren't the Gorn incorporated as part of the Klingon Empire?
Eventually, yes. That will be in the late 24th century. So it's not quite happened yet. They're just neighbors / frenemies, depending on the day. But the Gorn very much like their tanky ships, and part of the way that the Klingon shipyards were able to afford operating in the late 23rd century with so many was by doing a lot of foreign exports, and the Gorn were one of the main customers for that.
So financing other militaries in order to finance their own.
Effectively, yes. Well, yeah, building for other militaries to finance.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Building, equipping other militaries so that they can finance their own.
Yes. This ship mounts 5 torpedo tubes. You have 3 up front, 2 at the back, and a total of 7 disruptor cannons. So compared to some of the other ships that we've seen, like the Fat Man, which ends up just bristling with guns, this is relatively sane. I mean, it's still got 3 torpedo tubes, which is more than most Klingon ships, but it is certainly a more cruiser-like in its design.
Yeah, it's the head. I can't. This stupid extendo neck is just. Oh my god, I can't get over this stupid thing.
By having this this retractable neck and being able to go full turtle mode, you can absorb huge amounts of incoming fire and basically serve as a damage sponge, distracting the enemy and drawing all of their fire, while again, smaller, more agile ships get around the enemy and do the damage. This is just really meant to just sit there and tank, but it's designed in such a way that it's not such an encumbrance on the fleets that it's operating with.
See, that's perfectly reasonable, and that's totally understandable, and that's a respectable idea. However, I can't imagine it working any other way than in reverse. The Klingons are flying around in turtle mode, and it's the opportunity for honor, the opportunity for glory, the opportunity for combat, and the more they talk up all of that, the head just extends a little more. It's a little more rigid, shall we say? It's so dumb. I can't get over that. Like, it's a classic Klingon design, but man, the jokes just write themselves. I can't help it.
Hello there. That's a very nice target. Yeah, it's almost making like the awooga wooga face.
Almost, yeah. Extendo out.
Yeah,
that's silly. At least we're getting into more modern ships now, though.
Yes.
Are we getting into? So we're going to start touching on like the classic workhorses of the Klingon Empire now.
Well, yes. So critically,
Ooh,
we have
cool.
the Praxis disaster, that massive economic disaster, and we don't see Klingon battleships for a very, very long time. And really, Klingon battleships are only revived in the latter half of the 24th century after Gowron comes to power. And Gowron has just fought a civil war against Duras and wants to make sure that no other Klingon house gets the same ideas that the House of Duras did. And he thinks that the best way of doing that is by getting himself a nice fancy battleship that he can go around and intimidate everyone with, in much the same way that the original Corvat was built. The Corvat was built as a means of flexing on other great houses. The Negh'var would be his way of flexing on all the great houses.
Oh, I'm excited for this one. I know this one. The Negh'var is the ginormous over-the-top battleship, right?
Yes, the Negh'var is indeed huge. It is larger than the Galaxy class at 682 meters long.
Wow. Okay.
It's big.
That is a big boy.
It is very, very big.
It's enormous.
And basically, when it came to features, Gowron said yes. So the base level Negh'var, the Negh'var that we see in Way of the Warrior, has a couple of interesting features. The main torpedo tube located up front, that is not just a standard torpedo tube, that is a burst fire torpedo tube, like on the Enterprise D, which can fire up to 10 torpedoes. This can fire 8 torpedoes from that single tube.
So it just dumps them all out real quick, I would imagine, rather than having like multiple tubes?
No. It's one gigantic. The tube is enormous. Torpedoes in Star Trek are very small, so you can actually, if your aperture is big enough, like it is once we start getting up to these kind of sizes, you can fit 8 in there very easily.
Oh my god, are you telling me that they're actually firing torpedo shot? It's like grape shot, but
Yeah.
instead of little iron balls, it's torpedo. Come on, that's
Yes.
Klingons.
Yes.
Oh Klingons. How do we fit more torpedo tubes on? No, just make it bigger.
Just make a
Okay, but how
bigger
do we fit
torpedo
more
tube.
torpedoes in? Just put more torpedoes in the tube.
Yeah.
If they just fire them all.
Don't worry about
They're
it.
not concerned about them. They're not concerned about like sympathetic detonations or something. If the torpedoes, I don't know, interfere with each other or hit something on the way out the tube. No, it's not an issue.
No. Look, the Federation, in all fairness, Starfleet did it with the Galaxy class, so, obviously it's not dangerous, because Starfleet wouldn't do it, and they're a bunch of cowardly patucks.
I mean, yes, but Starfleet is also insane. Like, no other faction in the setting goes through as many weird quantum shenanigans or crazy sci-fi disasters as they do. I'm pretty sure Starfleet, or at least humanity in Starfleet, just function on the chaos principle. Like, they're flying by the seat of their pants. I don't think using them as an example is a good idea. You're probably going to wind up ruining everything.
Probably. So, as well as that, you also have, on the wings, two heavy disruptor cannons. These are big sort of pulse cannons. And then under the main bridge, and also on the inside of the wings, you can see if you look down on top, you've got two additional dual disruptor turrets, if you can see those.
Oh, I see what you're talking about, yeah.
Yes. That's actually a recent addition. The original model didn't have that, as far as we can tell. But more recent renditions of it have added those as actual disruptor, turrets. Again, much going back almost to that Corvette style of design with very big, obvious turrets.
Well, they would have to be absolutely massive turrets to justify putting them on then, wouldn't they?
I mean, they are pretty big, at least, compared to, well, other ships of the time. This is, when you're operating at this kind of scale, you can get away with an awful lot of design shenanigans. You will also notice that it actually has two sets of Bassard ram scoops. So most people agree that this ship is quad nacelled.
Oh, you're talking about... Okay, so that's not just one big, like, double nacelle that they stuck on. Those are, like, two separate?
The jury is out, and some people see it as a single large nacelle, but most people seem to agree that it is a quad nacelle design, which again echoes back to those other ships that we saw, like the Blood Slayer.
I don't know. I think I kind of fall in the camp where it's just two big ones. I never, every time I saw this ship, I never thought it was like quad design. I thought it was just, it's got two big ones on the end. Like, a lot of the classic Klingon, there's a picture in there, like the Vorcha as well. I always looked at it kind of like that. Like, it was just one really big one, and then they kind of put it into the wing a little bit for aesthetic design.
Yes, and also probably for protection a little bit. I mean, a thing to bear in mind with the Vocha, which you can find on some technical readouts, this is getting like really nerdy in depth here, is that there are actually different kinds of warp coil in there. So you've got your primary warp coils, but then you've almost got like your turbo warp coils.
Oh yeah, you hit the NOS. Let's go. You got the turbocharger.
Yeah. You've got a turbocharger, and so perhaps the Negh'var, the reason you've got that kind of that big section and then that tapered section going off the back of the nacelle is that, yeah, that's where your turbo coils are. Get you that extra bit of speed.
Damn, yeah, that's a beautiful battleship. I love that. It's classic Klingon.
Of course, we cannot forget to mention the most obvious part of the Negh'var, and that being those two gigantic siege guns underslung.
That's what those pods are. Okay.
Those pods are siege guns. They are basically the size of a Katinga. They are huge.
Okay, yeah, you're not wrong. You might be exaggerating just a smidge, but holy shit, yeah, no, you're not that far off. They are very large.
So if you recall in Way of the Warrior, the Klingons are pounding away at the station. They're not getting through the shields. DS9 is phasering and torpedoing the hell out of them. And then Gowron's like, right, let's get it. Let's just settle this. Sweeps in with the Negh'var. Negh'var fires one volley from its siege guns, and the station's shields go down like that.
Understandable, have a nice day. If brute force isn't working, it's because you're not using enough of it, and by God is this ship going to be using enough of it.
Yes. So the siege guns are perhaps the most memorable thing of the Negh'var, and it feeds into this whole separate thing of, in the Dominion War and in the 24th century, a whole new school of battleship design emerges, from siege battleships to fleet battleships to battlecruiser style battleships. That's a whole separate topic, and I won't go spiraling off into that. But suffice it to say that some Klingons thought that the Negh'var, as Gowron used it in DS9, was a little bit excessive.
Gee, just a little bit, you think? Maybe just a tad, just a smidgen.
So, what some Klingons decided they would do is come up with a different variant called the Voudet variant.
Oh, that's another real classic looking design. I really like that.
Yes, so as you can see, the Voudet gets rid of the massive siege guns and instead basically upguns the 3 main disruptor cannons, so that you then end up with 3 longer range, more powerful disruptor cannons. And also, critically, you save an awful lot of weight, and this means that the ship can actually maneuver and isn't just sitting around shooting at static targets, which is, granted, all Gowron's Negh'var had to do. We don't ever see it trying to shoot at ships, at least in the Prime timeline, but I suspect it would probably struggle to bring those siege guns to bear. This Voudet variant, which was more commonly produced as time went on, has a much, much better chance of actually hitting its targets and catching its prey.
Yeah, it looks like a far more slimmed down version of the Negh'var. It's like they took all the things that did work, put them into a ship, and then cut out all the things that they either didn't need, weren't working, or were only added because Gowron was like, heh, ego project, look how big my ship is.
Yes, and then someone sensible came along and said, okay, let's get rid of that, let's keep that, and just slowly make the ship more sensible.
Oh, it's a wonderful, wonderful looking ship, though. I'm glad that we're out of the era of cursed ships designs now.
It took a lot of curse, but we eventually got to this style of battleship. Another key thing to note, just briefly on the Negh'var, is that it has multiple bridges. Why do you think a Klingon battleship needs multiple bridges?
Okay, let me see. If I was going to go with the sensible answer, it would probably be a little too close to Starfleet logic, but the sensible answer would be redundancy and the ability to switch where you're commanding from if extreme damage is taken. Because, it's a battleship, it's going to be taking a lot of fire or whatever, but these are Klingons. Mm-hmm. They're not sensible.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure the reason there's a second bridge is so that this ship can ram something, take damage to the front, and then still continue fighting.
Not necessarily, although that's a good idea. No, the reason it has a second bridge is so that the fleet commander and the captain don't argue with each other.
Oh my god. Are you kidding? Wouldn't they be one and the same thing? Wouldn't the fleet commander need to be able to command, his flagship to go where he needed it to go? Why would there even be a captain on board that would be arguing with him?
Well, because you need a captain to operate go into the minutiae of operating the ship. But the fleet commander's got to control something in the region of, with the Negh'var, you're going to be looking at commanding a fleet of something in the range of about 100 to 120 ships. Yeah, between 90 and 120 ships for a Klingon fleet.
Okay, that is quite a bit. Yeah, fair enough. I guess having separate flag facilities for the fleet admiral would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, so you'd probably have the captain would probably be on the forward bridge, which is located at the sort of the start of the neck, that sort of first wedge section, and then the fleet commander was probably located in the dorsal rear section. Which is also supposedly a daughter craft that can separate in times of emergency. So if things go a little bit wrong, the fleet commander doesn't have to go down with the incompetent captain.
Ah, yes, the classic. No, it is not my fault, the Supreme Commander. It is the imbecilic underlings that couldn't carry out my orders properly. They're the ones at fault.
Exactly.
What a classic.
Exactly. Yes. So, that really brings us to the end of Klingon Battleships. We could go on to the ships of Star Trek Online and the 25th century, but I think that would just keep you even more than I already have, and I don't know if you've got the constitution for that.
Like the Constitution class? Ha ha ha! That was a terrible joke.
Did a thing.
that was awful.
I was wondering if you were going to take it.
you set it up for me. I had to take it, even if it was god awful. You still had to.
A poisoned chalice.
Hey, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's poison or not. You put the drink in front of me, got to take it. Overall, though, yeah, I mean, if you've got any other really, really ridiculous designs you want to quickly go over, or something that you can make me cringe at and carry with me into my nightmares, then yeah, sure, toss it. But if that's the end of the line, then I can confidently say you've shown me the best, and oh boy, have you shown me the worst of Klingon battleships.
Yeah, the many, many worsts of Klingon battleships. You kept thinking it was going to get better, didn't you?
Yeah, early on I was like, okay, we're starting pretty good. And then the next one is like, it's not my style, but we're getting better. This is good. We're getting more Klingon. And then we just took a nosedive. I don't know what happened. We took a right at Albuquerque when we should have took a left, and we ended up in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Dude. Like it was just worse and worse. It's like every single time, please no, please stop. This is the fat Klingon. This is the Starfleet Klingon. This is the pancake Klingon. This is the turtle Klingon. Like, please stop.
So what would you say was the best, and what would you say was the worst?
That's a hard one. I'm generally not a fan of the really, really big, chunky designs. Like, they're really good designs, and I like them. But in terms of my style of ship, not really a fan of them. What was that? The blood hunter,
the blood slayer with the 4 nacelles.
Yeah, I would say the blood slayer probably is my favorite. Its forward profile looks really good. The skeletal design is a little bit closer to what I like. The styling is uber Klingon. It looks fantastic, and it's the kind of thing that would be like, yeah, I would want to fly that around in a video game, or just even in real life if I could. It's fantastic. The Negh'var is cool, too chunky. The Vode class, though, that one's pretty good. That one's a close second.
Okay, and what would you say was the worst?
Do you even have to ask? You know which one it is. You know which one it is.
The B-10?
Yes, it's the B-10. Obviously, It's the B-10. The B-10 is awful. It's terrible. Like, literally, learning about the B-10, I have like an extra round of PTSD. Star Trek Discovery was so god awful. I hated their ship. I was like, oh my god, this is what happens when you take like a Klingon ship and you mix it with a Federation one. I'm like, this is awful. And I'm like, no, I didn't know how good I had it. I didn't know how good I had it with just that monstrosity. You had to introduce me to the B-10, and it's even worse. It's worse than anything Star Trek Discovery has ever done. I can't believe you've managed to find this abomination.
Okay. Well, Sai, it was really nice knowing you. There's going to be some very, very angry Klingons coming after you now. Because you...
Oh, that's fine. What are they going to do?
Because you said something was worse than Discovery.
Well, you know what? Maybe the Klingons shouldn't have built the single worst ship in all of Star Trek. Maybe they just shouldn't have done that, and then we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with.
All right. Well, with that bombshell, thank you for coming along. If you'd like to tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, pretty obvious. Just look up Science Insanity, Blue Sci Mark. That's my channel. I do general science fiction stuff. While Venom Geek might be significantly or entirely focused on Star Trek, I do a little bit more variety content, and I include new universes every now and again, like Battlestar Galactica. We've got some stuff for Stargate. We've got a couple different other universes in there as well, and, we just talk about sci-fi stuff. So if you want to learn about ships, if you want to learn about generic sci-fi things like weapons or shields or other topics like that, head on over. It's mostly entertainment, So while a lot of this is incredibly informative work done by Venom Geek, if you come on over to my channel, it's basically just going to be a couple of friends being absolute idiots while laughing about how ridiculous sci-fi is. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. And right at the end, subscribe to Venom Geek Media. He's doing the Lord's work and traumatizing other YouTubers with whatever the hell the B10 was.
Hey. At least I'm not Animarchy inflicting anime waifus on Drakinafel.
You know what? No, you're right. You're worse. Because at least Animarchy is giving something pleasant to look at. As much as he is sinning, at least he's giving something pleasant to look at. This is just pain.
Okay, well, with your torture is at an end, and you shall be set free. You have passed your trial of I can't remember what the trial is, but the one where Worf gets poked with the pain sticks. That's basically what you've been through.
All right, thank you very much for having me. It's been great. It was a pleasure going through all of this with you, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Outros are hard. I have no idea what to say. Goodbye.
All right, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.